Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to share some quick tips on how to get a smooth, even coverage when working with pan pastels for your backgrounds. Now, how to avoid the paper colour showing through your background is all in the application and the materials that we're using. I do find that it's all about the layering process and how much of that pan pastel we are using. Now, this is one of my first biggest tips. The amount of pan pastel that we're using is usually the culprit as to why the paper colour is showing through. Now, in most cases, if we use our applicators and we just apply that over the top of the pan pastel very lightly and then try to add that to the paper, it's actually going to just create a very thin layer that's more transparent and therefore shows that paper colour through. Now, one of the amazing things about pan pastels is their coverage. You really do get a lot of pastel for the small pan that you can see. It makes it feel like it might only be working for 2 or 3 projects. But these colours here I've had from the very beginning of working with my pan pastels, and that's got to be coming up for about 3 years. So to summarise that first tip, it's be generous with the amount of pan pastel that you are applying. You can see here how frequently I'm going back to my pan and reloading my applicator. Now, my next biggest tip is to use the right supplies. Now, the paper is a very big deal when working with pastels. My preference is Pastelmat as it really does allow for a lot of layers. Now, when I'm trying to get a very opaque looking background such as this and completely cover that paper colour, this is a really big deal. I want to be making sure that I'm never limited with the number of layers I can add because the paper is holding me back. Now, something that I do just want to mention regarding this is the importance of not filling the tooth of the paper if you're using your pastel pencils over the top. Now, this is something that I do talk a lot more about in my other videos here on YouTube, but just quickly here to mention that if you are adding your pastel pencils over any pan pastel area, including a background, you want to be more careful with how much you are applying to the surface. Now, filling the tooth of the paper will result in the pastel pencils just gliding over the top. They start to feel really slick and almost a little bit slippery. So if you feel that that is happening, then the likely reason is that the tooth of the paper has been filled. Now, because pan pastels are a much softer pigment, I do find that they can fill the tooth of the paper fairly early on if too much is applied. But with a background like this, where I'm not using any of my pan pastels really, apart from a little bit of the white in the corner for the reflection on the surface, I could pretty much go with as much of the pan pastel application as I wanted. If I wanted to create more of a smoother effect here, I'll just go in and add another layer. But we do need to be cautious of this and very aware of it if we're using our pencils on top. Now, the other supply that's really important here is the applicators that we're using to apply the pan pastel to the paper. For larger areas, my preference is the round or oval shaped soft tool, which is what I'm using here. The sponges feel quite unique, they're quite soft, and I do feel that they're able to get a bit more of a smoother blend, which is perfect for a gradient type effect as I'm trying to create here. Now, if I'm working on a much smaller project, then a little eye makeup applicator is always a good option. But I do find that for larger areas that's incredibly time consuming, and I do get better coverage with the soft tools. Now, in all of my real-time tutorials, I do try to make them very step by step so that even the most complex subjects are easier to tackle. And with a background like this, because I did have questions about how to get that nice coverage without the paper colour showing through, I wanted to split this up into 2 main processes. By showing first of all that we can get that paper covered first and then we can reinforce more of a soft blend. So this is only a minor alteration, but this I find makes the layering process easier. If I don't have to worry about all of this at one individual layer and I can break that up, it just makes each individual task more step by step. It's easier to then visualize and work through that. So here where I'm coming back in and adding more of the ultramarine blue, I'm making sure to use slightly less of that pan pastel pigment because I didn't want it to be as dark. And then I can use slightly lighter pressure on the soft tool to get more of that blend. Now, this of course is much easier for me to explain in the real-time version of this tutorial, which if it's of interest, I'll link all of the information to that in the description below. Now, to summarise everything again here, without doubt, my biggest tip is to make sure that we've got enough of the pan pastel on the applicator initially. If we first reload that and then we get a nice patch of good coverage and then it quickly fades, that tells us that we're not reloading that applicator often enough. In some cases, I might go back to my PanPastel every 2 or 3 seconds. Now this is going to vary depending on the background. This is more of a simple gradient effect rather than something that was more individual if I had some trees or some specific elements that I was isolating. But here, this is a good background to practice on for this kind of effect, where we're trying to cover that paper colour but also get a very smooth blend. We're only really focusing with 2 main colours and it makes that process easier. So I do hope this video has been useful. If it was, I'd be very grateful if you could give it a like and a thumbs up. It makes a huge difference to my channel. I do also upload a couple of videos to YouTube every week, so if you would like to get notified of that content, then don't forget to hit the subscribe and the bell button. If you have any art related questions, feel free to pop them in the comments below. I'm more than happy to help if I can. And I'm going to be uploading another video very soon, but as always, thank you so much for watching.